Welcome to Now for Someone Completely Interesting. I'm your host, Ben Poulin. I've known my next guest since I was, I'd say, 10 or 11 years old. And when you've known someone as a kid, it's a bit surreal to see them in a profession as unchildlike as it gets. Now, although it's no surprise that Jamie became a lawyer, as it runs in the family. His older brother's a lawyer, while Jamie is now the second generation running the practice that his dad started. If he decided not to practice law, I feel that he would have delved into something like writing for a satirical sketch comedy show, given his sharp wit and well-rounded knowledge of current social and political climates. A guy whose input on any conversation will either make you laugh, think, or both. My longtime friend, someone completely interesting, Jamie Morrow.
Great to be here, Ben. Thanks for having me.
So, as mentioned, you are a lawyer, which may surprise or not surprise me in some ways, but we'll get into that a little bit later. We've known each other a long time, and this is more like kind of catching up, I guess. But let's start out with a little bit about, talk about growing up here in St. Paul and some of your experiences with that.
Right. Well, I wasn't born here, but we actually moved to St. Paul when I think I was 4 or 5 years old. And so I started school here. I went to Glenavon here in St. Paul, met our mutual friend Brent Cossey on the first day of school in grade 1 and have been friends ever since. Graduated in St. Paul from regional high school. Actually started, I went to the University of Alberta, where I had it in my head I was going to become an engineer. So I didn't plan to be a lawyer right off the bat. That sort of came a bit later. I finished 1 year in engineering and decided that I would make a move to something else. And I had already, I think in the back of my mind, kind of had an idea that I might want to pursue law as a career. And so I made the switch after that first year, not into law, but to get a degree in history and political science, and then was accepted to law at the University of Saskatchewan, I guess in 2004 I started there and graduated in 2007, and actually wasn't even planning to come back to St. Paul initially. I worked as an articling student in Edmonton and stayed on there for the better part of a year after finishing my articles with a firm downtown Edmonton. And I started to, timing is everything, I guess. I knew, my dad was already looking to sort of find somebody to pass things over to, or to to have his own exit strategy, because he'd started farming. That could be the topic of another podcast, I'm sure. But anyways, ended up making the decision to move back to St. Paul in early 2009, and Christina Tier, who you probably know, was already working at the practice, and she and I a few short years later bought the practice from my dad. So that's kind of how I ended up back here, and it wasn't a grand plan, that's for sure. It kind of developed as time went by.
Well, let's expand a little bit. Okay, so went through high school, and like you said, I'm not exactly surprised that you got into let's call it the family business, but maybe a little bit too, because I always saw you had a lot of interests broader too as we grew up. Like like you mentioned, like engineering seemed like something that was more your fit. When you were growing up, was there some, because your brother's a lawyer too?
He is. It wasn't his first plan either. I mean, he was a school teacher actually, and taught for I think one year, and was working on a drilling rig about a year later, and then went back to school. Yeah. But I guess I did have a lot of interests. You mentioned political satire. I would say, I've always had a keen interest in politics. I don't think I'd ever, get involved beyond that. But, I guess where does that leave you? I think this hour has 22 minutes. Had already finished filming by the time I was.
Well, they're always looking for new writers, though, right?
Right. Yeah.
Or there's always something new that pops up. Um, so it's not like your dad ever kind of put it in your head or said, "Hey, you guys, maybe you want to try this." It's something you did. Was there something about how he went about his business that that made you think that it was a good option for you?
I guess just to back up to your first point, I never felt that I was being sort of pushed or
Right.
directed into that. I think my dad did a good job of,
Maybe not pushing, but campaigning or
yeah,
advocating.
I think I was felt relatively clear on sort of what the pros and cons were. I guess I did have the benefit of seeing, what rural practice looked like, and sort of how that allowed maybe a more balanced lifestyle than being a lawyer at a national firm in Edmonton or Calgary
Right.
or something like that. And liking the outdoors and, the fishing and hunting and that sort of thing on the weekends. It just seemed, the community was as much of a draw, or if not more than, the work itself, I guess, probably, less so. It was more of a lifestyle choice, I would say, to come back.
Getting into law then. So once you made that decision, now it's a broad spectrum of what you can do as a lawyer. I mean, there's the, I guess the classic Hollywood image of being in the courtroom with a big criminal case, but there's a lot of other aspects to it. Did you have anything in mind that you were going to, I guess, practice in a specific area, or were you always looking towards, like once you made that decision, that it was going to be, like you said, the rural practice where, you had maybe a little bit more laid back lifestyle with it as well? Or did you have a...
Yeah, I didn't have a single area in mind. When I worked in Edmonton, the firm I was with, their clients were corporations almost entirely. So that kind of rules out a lot of areas. There was no criminal law. There
Right.
was no family work. I'd have to say, and to this day, I kind of prefer sort of the less emotional areas.
Right.
Now, when I, as a young lawyer came back to town, I needed experience in all of in every facet of what the practice involved, and so I took on anything, and since then I've kind of streamlined what I do a bit more, and yeah, I don't, we do have an associate at the office that does family law. We've kind of got out of the criminal defense practice. Just it seems like we're busy enough with other things.
Right,
So.
right. Well, it seems like almost everything needs a lawyer. I mean, you buy a house, you need a lawyer to sign documents and stuff like that, which is kind of how I knew a little bit with your dad there, because when we bought our house here that we're sitting in, that was he was the lawyer that we went with the paperwork for, right? So,
Right.
Yeah, so many different aspects. But when you said like you weren't keen on the emotional connection with law, is that because of like if you're practicing criminal law or as a defense lawyer or something like that, getting, I guess, developing those connections with clients that...
Well, no, I like, the probably the most satisfying aspect of, I can't speak for others, but I'm sure for anyone that finds themselves in this profession is, being able to help somebody with a problem they have, because usually, regardless of what it is, it starts with they've got a problem or something they need you to handle for them that they're coming to you for. So I think just the the certain aspects of family law litigation, especially the more contentious types of matters where there's child custody issues and that,
Right.
I just and at the time, I mean, I only recently became a father myself, so in some ways I felt like maybe this isn't I don't understand or maybe appreciate some of the issues of why some of these
Right.
people, obviously, I mean, I can understand why this is stressful, and for people that are going through that and have to deal with some of those problems. I just I guess I'd sort of shied it away from that as soon as I could. So
Is it a bit of a challenge being in a small community where you pretty much know everybody and you have some of these contentious issues that you have to get involved with, but you know the people personally? Does that...
yes and no. I would have to say, you're, obviously, I mean, you maintain a, strict level of, everything's absolutely, confidential. And, I don't have an issue with it. I guess, it might be different if you were, hiring a lawyer to handle something like this for you, and then you're running into them at the grocery store line. I can't speak to that side of it.
Right.
For me, it's, it's just, it's compartmentalized. It's something
right.
that I just sort of leave, that's, office hours stuff. So.
Gotcha. So you've kind of developed that, or is that something you always had,
Well, I guess you develop it. It's certainly something, and as I'm sure anyone that lives in a small town, you can't go really anywhere without running
right.
into someone, so I mean, there's times where I'm sure we all really like that about about living in a small town, and there's other times where it's like, you'd rather probably just not have to worry about
but
running into someone.
It's not like other jobs where, like, if you get frustrated or just need to unload or vent, you don't have a lot of options because of the client confidentiality in that sense, do you? Or do you have an outlet for that? Do you people that you trust that you can?
My business partner, and
Okay.
you can sort of, and usually it's, you're if you're discussing something with another lawyer in your office, it's just, you're seeking some professional,
right.
It's sort of how you sometimes solve some of the problems that you're facing. So
right. You briefly touched on it, but I want to get into a little bit, because you always had a really good finger on the pulse of what's going on socially, politically, and in those interests, and always had maybe some entertaining comments, at least in my opinion, which is why I thought maybe it's
where you're going to try and get me into trouble.
No, no, actually where I'm going with this is a little bit different, but you've kind of already answered the question, but I wanted to expand on it. I always thought, and I've mentioned this in our circle of friends as well, that if there was another avenue that you went down the road, seeing as a lot of lawyers tend to venture into politics, but you've already said no. But has it ever? I mean, maybe now it's a no, but has it ever been something that you would have ever thought of pursuing?
Yeah, I guess that's something that's appealed to me. Maybe at different times. I'd have to say I'm fairly ignorant to sort of what's involved behind the scenes, and
right.
I sort of like listening to the different sort of policy contests, sort of in terms of different political parties sort of expressing their vision for which way we should be going, but the work I think that goes into it, I don't the knocking on the doors and
right.
Having to you're dealing with constituents and that people that have issues, and if I'm talking about going to the grocery store, and I can only imagine what our local MLA or member of parliament how they must feel. But I think if you have to question whether you've got the passion to do that, which that's where I see myself. I'm thinking that that's maybe just a door I probably won't open. So
how about maybe just a political analyst, like on
yeah, maybe as a sort of a Monday morning quarterback, I guess. For maybe I could start a podcast or something.
there you go. I mean, if you did, where would I want to go with this one here? No, maybe I won't. I'll leave it. I was going to maybe get the more political alignment there, but
yeah, no, you can go ahead. I won't. I don't have.
I guess in my yeah, I want to go politics, because politics has always been fun to talk with you, because you've always had good angles on it. And I'll bring up, we just had the Alberta election. I've never been so disappointed in the political landscape that the country has had right now, as far as options. What would you,
or lack thereof,
yeah. I just feel like everything is all about the party platform and not really about what is really going to help people and more grassroots. Like I don't think there's anybody that really cares anymore, right? And has that I mean, it's yeah.
I understand that if I guess criticizing sort of the options that, you know, the response to that, because I've made that, you know, same criticism. The response is, well, then you need to get involved. You know? And so, so putting that aside for a minute, if we're not looking to actually get involved, I agree. I don't know if it almost seems maybe like a problem with just sort of the party system, or I'm not sure if it's how they have to raise money, but it seems like, and it doesn't seem to be one side or the other, but it seems very divisive. It doesn't, I don't know, maybe I'm nostalgic, you know, for when I was growing up and you had sort of, you know, statesmen, and it seemed like the leaders seemed to be of a different caliber than we have now. And maybe that's just me getting old and bitter. I'm not sure, but it doesn't. I know what you mean. It seems like, you know, I feel sometimes like a bit of a political refugee in the sense what happened to the middle. Like it seems there's sort of one extreme or the other, and I don't know if that's just, it seems to be a lot more polarized. I guess it's sort of two camps.
Definitely agree 100% with you, and I think partisan politics, that's where they've taken us to that point where. I think a long time ago there used to be somewhat of a cooperation in some sense if it meant making things better for your constituents, even if you were on opposing party sides. And when you say, you know, well, if you don't like the system, get involved, well, that's part of the problem too. I think a lot of good people have gotten involved, but they're overwhelmed by towing that party line, I guess. And the only way you can get into the system is to be a part of one of those parties. You know, I did see a few independent signs in the last election in the area, not so much in ours. Our constituency was only a 2-horse race here, which was disappointing in a sense like that. But I guess, you know, maybe an independent structure, more independents getting involved would kind of put the stamp on that. Hey, we don't have it right here. There's too many. And
I understand, you know, I think what, you know, and there's people a lot more qualified to speak on this than me. But I can see what, you know, how we've benefited from having a political party system, or they do pretty much everywhere. They've got democracy. You know, it exists. I just, it seems like just the stances though have you know, I find on the, you know, on the right and on the left that there's just the middle ground doesn't seem to be occupied anymore. And except for, I think most, and maybe I'm out to lunch on this, but I think most voters are in that middle ground, and that's why you know, a lot of us find it difficult, I think, to actually decide where to place your vote. So
all right. Didn't mean to get so far into that, but I mean, it was always something I enjoyed talking to you about with over the years is getting into those, even as far back as when we were young teenagers, right? You think we'd be getting into trouble? No, we were talking politics.
Yeah, that might have been our the company we kept, I guess. But
it hindered us in some ways, but man, we didn't know about it.
Right.
Going back, I guess through your years as a lawyer, you've been doing it for a few years now. What would be some of the takeaways that you really appreciate from doing your job?
Well, I you know, I can say, you know, just some of the insights or the experiences I've had when I did first come back to town. I was fairly busy with criminal defense practice. I've always had a lot of respect for the RCMP. My dad was an RCMP before he went to law school. But just seeing, you know, I'm sure there's maybe tougher jobs out there, but I can't name one off the top of my head. And just dealing with that task or what they do on a daily basis, I think it's in a lot of ways it's thankless, but I think they are appreciated and they should be. You know, in my own experience for what I do, I guess, you know, I'd say that I've, you know, enjoyed, you know, getting to know people on that level. And at the end of the day, if you can, you know, look back and think that you've sort of helped them navigate a system that isn't, you know, that easy for trained people, much less the the lay person. There's a lot of satisfaction in helping somebody through that in times whether it's an estate and there's been a death in the family, and then trying to navigate the the legal system to deal with the property, or pretty well anything that we're dealing with someone on. Usually it's a major issue for whoever we're working for, and to be able to help them through that, I've always taken a lot of satisfaction in it.
Going back to quickly here, when you're the time you spent as like criminal defense, did you ever have an experience where how would I word this? I don't want to implicate anything here or anything like that, but you have someone you pretty much know they committed the crime, but you got to defend them anyways. Is that a tough position to be in to do your job properly at that point? Or how does that?
Well,
how do you approach something like that?
And I've been out of this area for a few years, so I won't get into too much detail on that, other than to say I think you're most young lawyers coming out of law school are trained that you're just there as part of the system. Now you're not going to. There's certain things you can't do if your client has told you if they've told you in confidence that that they've done something or not done something, you can't put them on the witness stand and listen to them then tell a different story to the court. So you're not taking part in anything like that. I know when you watch shows on TV, sometimes it sort of seems like maybe that's not the case, but you're just there. The Crown or the prosecution has a case to make, and if there's a reasonable doubt, you're there to sort of help draw that out and make it clear that in a particular case that if the prosecution hasn't met that burden, then that you've done your job. You're not it's not your job to sort of see that whether they're found guilty or not guilty. So.
Is that again a point where you compartmentalize between office and away, and kind of flip the switch where you say, okay, I'm just here to do this job. I'm not here to make any assessments on it. Like I guess maybe even if they don't confess to you in private, but maybe you just know that.
Yeah, and like I say, my practice hasn't involved criminal defense work for quite a few years now. So I can I know enough about it that and had enough experience in that area just to see that your job gets done. You give your client the best defense you can, and sometimes the prosecution will have made that case, and sometimes they won't, and your job is just to see that they're required to prove it, and yeah.
I guess because you see that, and again, this is the glamorization of it through TV and movies, is the villainization of the defense lawyer. I mean, I wasn't saying it that way. I was just trying to say, well, I'm not talking about maybe like serious headline crimes here or anything, but just those things where you kind of have to. I mean, maybe you know better or don't, but I digress, right?
Yeah.
So
that's fine.
just wanted to see like what I guess the approach would be in a situation where, I mean, it's we as just a lot of people don't have that inside appreciation of doing something like that.
Yeah, and so you're sort of, I guess, kind of wondering, how do you navigate that, right? That's you have an opportunity to sort of test the evidence, and that's one thing with criminal defense. You're not looking to usually prove something. You're just sort of poking holes in the case that's been brought, and so I think if you look at it as that's really what you're doing, you're not if the case is solid, they're likely to be convicted, and you'll have done your job regardless of what the outcome is. So
you can live with yourself.
yeah, I can. At least I could. I guess I'll be thinking about it now. But thanks, Ben.
Maybe that career in politics isn't looking so bad. No. I appreciate you fielding the question, because we didn't really prepare this or anything like that, and I wasn't sure, what you'd be comfortable with discussing in that line of questioning there, to use a legal term.
Yeah, no problem.
I guess one of the last things there too along that line is being in a court. When you have to, speak to judge, jury, and all that kind of stuff. Is there some kind of an intimidation factor, or is that something they train you for in school? Like that's really what people see as lawyers doing. We don't see all the other types of litigation that goes on, like you talked about, like stuff that doesn't even come close to coming into a courtroom.
Right. That's a large part is public speaking, which, you're obviously, with your radio background, comfortable with speaking, and I don't know where this comes from, but you've heard that, there's a lot of, they say more people are afraid of public speaking than death or something.
Yes, 100%.
to that effect. And I'm no different. My wife and I emceed a wedding in November last fall, and I was more uptight about that than I was, than I am speaking in court. But it's just, I think it's like anything. The more of it you do, it's like, it's like anything. There's those jitters sometimes in when you start, and then hopefully you kind of get, into your rhythm, and sort of, everything else kind of fades away. So, one advantage, usually when you are in court, even if it's a, packed courtroom, you've kind of got your back to 90% of the people that are in there. And it's, just sort of the judge and the other lawyers, that you're actually, addressing, and any witnesses. So, but then the more of it you do, the more comfortable you become, certainly. So
did you ever take public speaking courses or anything like that?
I haven't taken anything formally. I remember in school they used to, Glen Avon used to do a public speaking contest. I remember, taking part in that in grade 7, 8, and 9 junior high. I remember, Mr. Paholic was the language arts teacher, and he usually, that was sort of his project was, getting grade 7, 8, and 9 students to speak in front of a full gymnasium. And I remember being terrified about that, but it's good experience. But I know I think 4-H has a very active public speaking program, and that's such great experience for anybody, but kids especially, if you can get them comfortable with doing that. Part of it comes down to if you, it's a lot. Preparation is key when you're in a situation where you can prepare. If you have that extra bit of confidence you get from being prepared, that really makes a difference.
Have you ever got to stand up and yell objection?
Oh, well, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that part that does happen. So,
but did it involve you slamming your hand?
No, I can't say I've done that before.
All right. So. And never held in contempt?
No.
Okay, good. Well, once again, Jamie, you've listened to a few of these now, I know, because you did your homework like any good lawyer would for coming on this podcast. So the last question I'm firing at you, is coming. You, at one point, were recommended for this podcast as someone completely interesting from a previous guest. So now it's your turn.
He's probably rethinking his suggestion right about now.
I don't think so. Never a disappointment. So you're here as someone completely interesting. If you were to recommend someone that you think is completely interesting. Yeah. And
I didn't, have you had Ashley Van Leeuwen on your podcast?
No, I haven't.
Well, he would, I had an opportunity to reconnect with him here, about a month or two ago at the regimental ball in St. Paul. And we grew up playing GI Joes together in the sandbox at his house and my house, and he took that to a whole different level than I did. And he's seen some stuff. I would I'd be excited to hear him sort of interviewed or do a podcast.
Absolutely.
Like this.
And you know what? I did talk to him quite a bit at the RCMP Regimental Ball as well. So I'm glad you recommended him, because I have sent the invite there. So I'm just waiting to hear
great.
back. He I think he'll be back sometime in the fall. He comes back for hunting season
Okay.
here. So yes, I'm definitely going to try to set something up with him. So thank you for recommending him. And again, thank you so much. I know you're a busy guy with the young kids, dogs, family, everything like that, and made sure everyone was put to bed.
Yeah,
before
I had to
do your responsibilities. So once again, my guest is Jamie Morrow. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please make sure you give us a like and subscribe through your favorite podcast provider. You can find us by searching Pool and Radio, or now for someone completely interesting, my guest once again, Jamie Morrow.